Good morning. Thank you very much to all participants joining us online for this training session, and thank you also to our host institution today, where participants are gathering for the on-site version of this webinar, that is the Belize Training and Employment Center of the Institute for Technical and Vocational Training in Belize City. Welcome to the third dedicated training in open government and open data for non-government stakeholders of the project Promoting an Open Government Ecosystem in Belize, implemented by the Trust for the Americas and the Department for Effective Public Management of the Organization of American States, with the support of the Embassy of the United States of America in Belize. My name is Mike Mora. I'm a specialist of the Department for Effective Public Management of the OAS, from where I coordinate activities in different areas such as digital and open government, open data, among others. I am joined by Mr. Henry Wade in Belize. He is the project local coordinator, and he's facilitated at this time the on-site version of this online session that you see also in the screen. Thank you to Henry for joining us and facilitate this space there in Belize City. Today, we especially would like to thank the University of the West Indies and through it to the Caribbean Open Institute, and thank you also to Colab.re, represented here through our speakers of the day, who are going to talk to us in light of their experiences about practical cases of open data that can show us how open data can create better services and promote social and economic development. So thank you very much to all of you. The Open Government and Open Data session that we begin today are open to anyone from civil society that for the purpose of this project we will consider part of the open government ecosystem of Belize. That is civil society organizations, foundations, private sector, academia, and any other citizen interested in participating. Our goal is to embrace, specialize, and develop skills in a dedicated group of stakeholders that can become agents for change, willing to support innovation in public management and public service delivery through open government. So I want to thank you again for your attendance and commitment. Please do not miss the following session of the training program. That will be actually the last one of the series for civil society that we have put together. So I encourage you to be there at this very same time next week for the very last session. We also encourage you to revert the knowledge that you're about to receive with colleagues and people in your communities, as well as revisit and share all previous sessions. As a matter of fact, we shared in the chat of this session a few links to the videos of previous sessions. You can also take a look at that and share widely in your communities. You can also find the resources easily in the project's Facebook page. We will share the link. Actually, it's shared in the chat tool. And also, I'll remind you that the video materials related to this very session on practical experience of usage of open data will be also shared with you afterwards. For questions about the project and how to engage, please contact our project coordinator in Belize, Mr. Henry Wade. You also will find his contact information on the chat session. Just for format of this session, at the end we will have a session for questions and answers with the speaker. So please prepare your questions. Send us those through the presentations using the chat tool. And if you are in the on-site venue, make sure you relay those questions to Mr. Wade, so they can be addressed at the end of the presentations. Don't wait until the end. Just do it throughout the presentations. In that time, we make the better use of our time. Without further ado, I would like to present the speakers of the day. That is Maurice McNaughton, joining us from Jamaica, and Miss Luisa Barbosa, and Luisa Jardim, joining us from Brazil. So they're on camera right now. Thank you very much. I will present you in detail once it's time for your presentation. In the meantime, I thank you for this opportunity to have you there in this introduction. I will ask then to turn your cameras off. Only Brazil and Belize and myself so we can have Maurice on camera. He's going to start with the presentations today, and then we'll come back to Luisa in Brazil. Thank you very much. So from this time on, the mic is all yours. Maurice, I will present you shortly, and we can start your presentations. So Maurice McNaughton is the director of the Center for Excellence for IT-Enabled Innovation at the Mona School of Business and Management of the University of the West Indies. And he's currently doing active research in the areas of open data and big data, mobile financial services, and open source platforms. He's a founding member of the Caribbean Open Institute, a regional coalition of Caribbean organizations that engages and works with regional governments, researchers, journalists, technologists, NGOs, and academics to raise awareness, strengthen capacity, and foster collaborations towards the adoption of open development approaches. Dr. McNaughton holds a PhD in decision science of Georgia State University and has over 20 years of senior management and leadership experience in the planning and direction of enterprise-level information technology in organizations. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Dr. McNaughton. I'm going to load your presentation. You can open your mic and begin.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Good morning, everyone in Belize and in Brazil. It's really a pleasure, again, to be able to participate in this session, and we're really looking forward to welcoming Belize, both on the public sector side and the civil society side, to the Caribbean open data community. I enjoy these conversations. We speak a lot with public sector and with governments, but the conversations that are most interesting and in fact most inspiring for me are the ones that we have with civil society organizations, whether it's the private sector, NGOs, or academia, or in fact the civic tech community, because those are the conversations and those are the constituents that I think have the capacity to bring the most value to the open data ecosystem. So again, very pleased to be here. I will speak a little bit about the Caribbean Open Institute, which in fact itself is a coalition of organizations which are mostly civil society organizations, and then talk a little bit about some of the domains in which we've experimented with open data in the Caribbean and areas that we think have the greatest opportunities for creating value. So the Caribbean Open Institute rests on these three pillars: advocacy, evidence, and capacity. So that in advocacy, again, we engage a lot in dialogue with the public sector around encouraging the publishing of open data and exploring the opportunities for open data to create value. Perhaps more relevant to this discussion is the work we've done in evidence, which is really doing research to understand the nuanced opportunities for open data in the Caribbean. And then capacity building is a big part of what we think is important and critical to enable the open data ecosystem. So capacity building in whether it's basic data literacies or other aspects of the data ecosystem to make sure that, whether it's journalists, whether it's in academia, whether it's in the private sector, we have the competencies to extract value from the open data that is published by the state. So let me tell you a little bit about let's get these slides moving. Yeah. So I imagine as part of this educational series, everyone knows what open data is by now, and a lot of the emphasis has been on open data published by the government. So there is actually quite a few other opportunities for open data not published by the government, and in fact civil society through crowdsource initiatives, one of which we'll talk about a little bit, can also be a publisher of open data. But a lot of our interest is in data published by the state, which is published in such a way that it is available for use and reuse. And in fact, a lot of our interest is in how we can create value from use rather than just publishing for the sake of publishing, of course. So the Caribbean Open Institute is part of a global network that we call the Open Data for Development. And so it's a regional hub that focuses on activities in the Caribbean, and we have colleagues like Ilda in Latin America and in Asia and in Africa. So there's a lot of value in us being part of this global community so that we can benefit from a lot of these global open data initiatives, whether it's Open Data Charter, the School of Data, which focuses on capacity building, the Open Data Leaders Network, which focuses on building champions and leaders in government around open data, or the Open Data Barometer, for instance. So these are all sort of global initiatives that we have the opportunity to participate in, have dialogue with our colleagues in other jurisdictions, and in fact be able to learn from other experiences, so that our colleagues in Latin America have perhaps one of the strongest civil society constituencies in open data in the world, and there's much that we have learned from working with our colleagues at ILDA, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about that from Louisa and Louisa later. But aside from participating in this global dialogue, one of the things that is quite important for us is to understand the Caribbean nuances, so that open data is not one size fits all. We can't just lift open data initiatives or strategies from North America or Latin America for that matter and just apply them wholesale to the Caribbean. We have to understand the Caribbean's own idiosyncrasies and nuances to make sure that we can look at the best opportunities and applications of open data. So in the Caribbean, there are cultural challenges. My experience certainly has been that in many of our public sector agencies, there is a reluctance and unwillingness to openly publish and share data. I don't know if this is the same sort of cultural and institutional habit in Belize, but this is something that we have experienced and have actively worked to encourage the publishing of data. But as well, we've found that in the Caribbean, civil society and media have been somewhat, maybe apathy is a strong word, but somewhat not as proactive in terms of pushing our governments to be more serious about open data. So if I compare, for instance, the civil society responses to open data in the Caribbean with our colleagues in Latin America, it's quite different. And so part of our engagement in sessions like these is to not only encourage awareness, but to encourage a lot more advocacy on the part of civil society to become an active part of the open data ecosystem. So in a sense, when we have looked at open data in the Caribbean, a lot of our approach has been around focusing more on how open data can drive innovation and problem solving. I mean, a big part of the open data dialogue is around transparency and accountability as well. But while that is important, we believe, and our experience has been, that we get a lot more resonance in the dialogue when we focus on the innovation and problem solving aspects of open data. So the work of the Caribbean Open Institute and a lot of our engagement has been around looking for these opportunities, to innovate or to solve problems in a Caribbean context. In the global open data discourse, there's a lot of conversation around the size of the economic opportunity. And you will see numbers ranging from $3 trillion in the McKinsey studies to $206 billion in the European Union. And even if the numbers vary a little bit, the consensus is that open data has the potential to create a lot of economic value. A big part of our focus has been on exploring those value opportunities in a Caribbean context. And so, while there are some sectors such as, in education, in transportation, in other jurisdictions where there are big value opportunities, some of those are also important for the Caribbean, but we think sectors like agriculture and tourism, which are obviously priority sectors for the Caribbean, are areas where we wanted to focus a lot of our attention on the opportunities for open data. I mean, we've also done work in areas such as education, in open budgets, in marine protected areas, and those are also important Caribbean sectors that are relevant for the Caribbean. But for the rest of the session, I want to focus really on these two sectors, on agriculture and tourism, and just talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that we see, and importantly, the role that civil society can play in participating in realizing some of these value opportunities. So agriculture is obviously an important sector for the Caribbean. And so when we looked at the economic value opportunities in the Caribbean, and in fact, I'll tell you that the studies that we did for the Jamaican economy suggested that open data could create anywhere up to between 0.75 and 1.5% GDP of value. Now, that's significant given the growth challenges that some of our economies have had. But we also thought it was important to take that macro number and break it down to sort of the discrete opportunities. So if you look at agriculture, for instance, we've done a lot of work with the Ministry of Agriculture, and specifically the agency that deals with extension services for farmers, and have identified quite a number of opportunities. One, for instance, is how do we tackle challenges like predial larceny, which is the theft of agricultural produce. So, just crowdsourcing open data on incidences of predial larceny, for instance, can provide significant opportunities for the security forces to improve detection and investigative capability. We've also looked at opportunities for open data to create innovation opportunities for entrepreneurs. And again, I'll talk about a couple of examples there. So, I'm not going to go through all of the examples on this chart, but it lists really what we see as the opportunity areas to apply open data to agriculture. And if you think about it, if we change the stereotype of agriculture from a farmer working in a field to a knowledge-based, information-intensive sector, then we begin to understand the opportunities that open data presents for greater efficiencies, greater linkages, and greater innovation in agriculture. A couple of quick examples from the work that we did with the ministry, with the agency. We were able to take data that they had, that they used to produce as statistical reports, and visualize that so that you could look at a map of Jamaica, for instance, and see every single farm, understand the characteristics of each farm, what is being produced, and look at that on a geospatial basis. And that obviously creates a resource that can facilitate various kinds of production planning activities, for instance. One of the things that has been quite interesting, and this graphic illustrates that, is taking price data that's published on a weekly data by an agency of the ministry and say, well, let's make that open data and let's look at that in terms of trends. And this visualization shows a problem that we understand very well in our context, right? That the volatility of commodity price data, and this really represents an information asymmetry problem. The fact that today there's a shortage of a particular crop, say tomatoes, so the prices are high and everybody goes and plants tomatoes. In 3 months' time, all of this comes to market. There's a glut, and it pushes the prices down, and so you have these perennial cycles. And that's because farmers are making production decisions as individuals rather than taking the opportunity to use data and make these decisions in an aggregate, optimally efficient way. So again, those are just some illustrations of some of the opportunities that we've seen in agriculture. And this applies in Jamaica as well as other Caribbean countries, including Belize. So we've done some interesting work in the agriculture domain. Let me talk a little bit about tourism, because tourism is clearly one of the big priority sectors for I think for most of our Caribbean countries. In countries like Jamaica, it ranges from a contribution of maybe 20% GDP to some of the smaller countries where Caribbean can be as much as 60% contribution to GDP. So it's clearly an important sector. And again, we think the opportunities around open data are quite significant. For instance, if you look at linkages between tourism and other sectors such as agriculture, the experience in Jamaica, and again, I don't know if it is this similar in Belize, but 30% of the agricultural produce consumed in the tourism sector is imported. When we have agriculture as a main sector. And that's again an information asymmetry problem. If we had a better way of using data and information to establish the linkages between those sectors, then one could improve or increase the contribution of agriculture to tourism as a sector. So again, that's one example of the value opportunities. The other that I'll talk a little bit about is community tourism, which is increasingly a significant part of the tourism market. And it's looking a little bit beyond the traditional sand, sun, and sea tourism product. And again, open data has a big role to play in facilitating activities such as community tourism. So let me talk about that a little bit and just brief you on a pilot project that we've done in Jamaica around open data and what we call interactive community mapping. So the idea here is that there are communities that have very rich either cultural or historical artifacts that could become strong tourism products, and a large part of the knowledge about those communities rests within the community themselves. And so the interesting thing is, we developed this sort of layered model for tourism open data, which showed that while a lot of the data is published by the government, the more important data in community tourism is actually data that is known by the communities themselves. And so, we probably don't have a lot of time on the call to spend on this, but I think it's one of the powerful opportunity areas in using data and interactive community mapping to enhance community tourism. So that in doing this pilot project, we developed this model of building a open geodata ecosystem that can enhance community tourism. And in Jamaica, this pilot worked very well, and we're actually exploring a number of opportunities to do this for other pilot communities. So we did quite a bit of work in Augustown, which is a community in the neighborhood of the university. And so we got a bunch of kids from the community. We trained them on community mapping. And so these are kids, young people, young adults from the community who know their community, were able to go around their community and do the mapping of all these artifacts, whether it's the historical Bedward Church or if this the musical studio of Sizzler, which is a famous reggae artist, and a whole set of artifacts that are known in that community but unknown to tourists. And so the idea is to create this community open data ecosystem and then build apps around it so that a tourist could pull out a mobile app, and if they have an interest in cultural tourism or in heritage tourism, they can find these nuggets and be able to interact with these communities and enjoy, these whether cultural artifacts or historical artifacts or in fact musical artifacts that are not in the mainstream tourism information. So it's a really powerful opportunity for many of our countries and many of our communities, and we're looking to do some additional work in some other communities in Jamaica to advance this. So those are two examples that I wanted to illustrate. I really want to emphasize the idea here that the value in initiatives like these come from not just waiting for and relying on the government to publish open data, even though that is important, and we'll probably situate that at the top of the open data ecosystem food chain, but to emphasize the fact that the value of open data comes from all of these participants in that ecosystem, whether it's NGOs, academia, the media, civic tech, who are the intermediaries who can take a lot of these data assets and create value-added applications, for instance, such as a mobile tour guide, the private sector, the business community, and of course individual citizens. So the idea here, and the one that I want to emphasize if nothing else in this conversation, is that the value that we can extract from open data, and the value is significant. We're talking about anywhere up to 1 and 1.5% GDP if we can maximize the value. But our ability to extract that value depends to a large extent on our ability to mobilize civil society to become not only active participants in this open data ecosystem, but to become active role players in this ecosystem. So that's extremely important, and if nothing else, I'd like you to take that away from this conversation. All right, so one of the things I just want to introduce you very briefly, because we hope that in a few weeks it might become a part of the Belize Open Data Experience, is an event that we've had in the Caribbean called DEVCA. And DEVCA was sort of conceptualized and designed precisely around the idea of how do we bring all of these stakeholders in the open data ecosystem into the same conversation, into a forum where they can collaborate, share ideas, solve problems. So we're talking about bringing the public sector agencies, media, academia, and importantly, civic tech activists into a forum where we can focus on specific areas of open data opportunity. And so let me tell you a little bit about DEVCA. It's a multi-country event. It combines an open data sort of knowledge conference with what we call a hackathon. We've had 4 editions of DEVCA thus far. The last one was in 2016. We hope to have the next one in 2019, or perhaps in a few weeks. Maybe Mike can talk some more about that. We've had the event countries participating, including Jamaica, Trinidad, the Dominican Republic, Barbados, Guyana, Cuba, St. Kitts. And for each DEVCA, we've tried to focus on certain thematic areas, such as agriculture, or tourism, or education, or data journalism. And so it's been a very powerful forum for not only driving awareness and appreciation of open data, but to move the open data conversation from something abstract to something very real and tangible, so that we can drive engagement of these various stakeholders. We can experiment around some of these open data opportunities. And in fact, out of DEVCA, a number of the civic tech activists that have participated have taken some of these ideas and have become entrepreneurial ventures. So DEVCA has been really important for engaging not only with government leaders. We've generally tried to bring in international experts to provide a perspective on open data from other jurisdictions. Paul Kukubu from Kenya, Joel Gurin from Open Data Center for Open Data Enterprise, Prasanna from the World Bank, so that generally we use it as a forum not only for awareness and education, but as well to talk about the kind of research that is being done in academia, and perhaps more importantly, to get the tech community involved in the open data conversation. So what you see, for instance, in this image are developers in Jamaica, in Guyana, in Cuba, in the Dominican Republic, or in Trinidad, working on the same set of problems and the same set of open data resources, and coming up with really innovative solutions based on their own experiences and their own perspectives. And I mean, I think that's a very, very powerful undertaking. And so while DEVCA is a 24-hour to 36-hour event, the amount of energy and ideas and innovative sort of concepts that emerge from bringing all of these bright young minds together is quite powerful, and we're certainly hoping to see Belize participating in such an event in the near future. The other thing that we've done with DEVCA is engage the business community, who, as far as I'm concerned, if open data is to become sustainable in the Caribbean, then we have to actively engage the private sector to not only see it as a source of value, but to be prepared to bring resources, whether financial or data resources, to bear on the open data ecosystem. So I think that's an important part of the Caribbean conversation going forward. A quick example of one of the initiatives that came out of DEVCA was in Dominican Republic, where a NGO, Participación Ciudadana, I guess citizen participation, worked very closely with a number of developers to build an electoral monitoring application. And they made the decision to focus on this because DEVCA took place maybe about 6 weeks before the provincial and national elections in Dominican Republic. And the apps that were built in that DEVCA became a really important part of the election monitoring activities. And again, it's just a powerful illustration of what happens when you bring, all of these various stakeholders in the open data community together around a specific problem space. So just to wrap up quickly, the things that we consider important for the Caribbean are certainly this principle of innovation fellowships, where the public sector works in collaboration with civil society. And by civil society here I mean the technologists, the NGOs, academia, to create value in key development areas that are important to the Caribbean or the specific country. And again, I gave you examples in agriculture, tourism, but it may be different contexts for Belize, for instance. But really having all of these players come together to work together to collaborate and to create value in the open data ecosystem. We believe that our governments, because of the role in Caribbean society, have to not only publish open data, but they also have to actively play on the demand side. So again, a lot of opportunities for greater efficiency in agriculture will happen if our government agencies adopt the innovation solutions that are developed by the technologists. And one of the things that we think is extremely important is sharing resources. So a lot of the problems that we have encountered are very common problems across our Caribbean countries and communities. And so the work that we've done in community tourism, for instance, we believe is something that we can replicate in communities in Belize or in communities in Guyana, so that we have to take the opportunity to look at regional approaches and building what I call a Caribbean digital commons, where we can share these apps, we can share data, we can share standards and approaches, rather than every single country doing their own discrete initiatives. So I think that is extremely important and extremely powerful if we can create this sort of shared approach to what I want to call a Caribbean digital commons. And such a commons really is a critical pillar in, as we think about the Caribbean of the future and the importance of building digital capacity and digital competencies. Open data is going to be an important part of that. Digital literacy and data literacy is going to be an important pillar in that. And our ability to create innovative indigenous solutions and to share those across our different constituencies is going to be an important part of that. So this idea of regional approaches is extremely important. And again, I'm looking forward to what emerges from the discussions taking place in Belize and how we can contribute and participate in moving that forward. So, thank you. Those are my remarks. Look forward to the follow-on questions. Mike, I'll turn back over to you.
Thank you very much, Maurice, for your presentation. It's great to hear. A perspective from the Caribbean, of course, a lot of action, a lot of things happening, that there is a space, a platform, a regional one, and of course that COI, the Caribbean Open Institute, plays a role in all this. So it is very good to hear. Thank you for your insights. There is a lot of reactions, comments, questions that participants have left in the chat. I encourage you to take a look at those in preparation to the Q&A as well, if you would like to get a sense of that discussion there on the chat. But thank you very much. I will certainly focus in one part of your presentation during the last minute, during the next minute, I'm sorry, that I have before moving to Brazil. And that is to say that yes, DEFCA, Developing the Caribbean, it is an activity that we are envisioned to have in conjunction to what we are planning to be and have named the Belize Open Week BOW. And so we're planning on that activity. As a preliminary, and to all participants connected here, this is a preliminary of that, and you will get more information through our local project coordinator, Henry White, there in Belize City right now as we speak, facilitating the on-site session of this training. To say that we are planning a whole week of activities with training, with a best practice exchange forum, with a hackathon, and with a round dialogue table that all combined will pursue the objective of this project of strengthening the open government ecosystem in Belize, but also with specific outcomes, so look into specific initiatives, project initiatives that can actually land all this discussion, all this training about open government and open data to very practical initiatives that can be implemented in Belize. All these within the framework of DEFCA that Maurice presented very well, the development the Caribbean initiative, and I think it's not just a good platform to do all this, but to realize that Belize, with this project and with the opportunity of the Belize Open Week and DEFCA, set for the country, for government, for civil society, academia, private sector, to come all together to think about practical solutions with the methodology of open government and with the usage of open data. So it is not just because we're implementing it, but because the project has certainly bring to the attention of the international community around these two areas of open government, open data, and they're interested in participating, in bringing expertise to Belize, in facilitating as much as possible as to for Belize to undertake open data and open government initiatives. So stay connected with that idea. Again, please contact our project local coordinator on the ground, that's Mr. Henry White, and we should be going live with this information widely very shortly, within the next days or next week, and so you are the ones who are exposed to this information, and we encourage you to, to participate on those activities. So thank you very much. Time is of an essence, and we have another great presentation coming up in very detail. That's a specific experience developed in Brazil. I'm going to invite Luisa Barbosa and Luisa Jardin to connect the camera, and we're going to say goodbye to Maurice's camera, and that way we can start with the next presentation. Thank you very much, Maurice, and thank you to Luisa in Brazil. Let me introduce them. Let me introduce Luisa Barbosa. Luisa Barbosa, who you will see on the right of the screen. It's a public administration specialist analyst at Colab. She's responsible for government's acquisitions and customer success. She has a degree in public administration from Fundación Getulio Vargas in Brazil, and has previous experience in advocacy and at Endeavor. Endeavor is a global NGO dedicated to the development of the business environment in Brazil. Now, on the left side of the screen is Luisa Jardim. Hello, Luisa. She's a public administration specialist analyst at Colab as well. She's responsible for user support and participatory processes. She has a degree on public administration from, again, Fundación Getulio Vargas, and has worked with sustainability with the sustainability at a study center in Brazil and at a recycle company in Chile. So we have a great background here altogether. Colab, it's a great experience. I invite you to pay close attention to all participants to this very practical experience that I think you can translate to a setting such as Belize. So thank you very much to the Luisas there, and the mic is all yours, and the presentation is actually, it should be on. If not, I'll put it on in a second.
Hi everyone, and first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here talking to you about how services can help to improve social and economic development through open data. So we are very excited to be here and to be considered as one of the experiences to be shown for you in this moment. We are going to talk about Colab. So I was going to introduce ourselves, but thanks Mike for doing it. So first of all, to start, what Colab is built on. So we believe that engaged citizens, among with open and participative governments, if they work in cooperation, are the key to better cities for better citizens. So to start, first we see now worldwide a deficit of $4 trillion. This is a data of McKinsey, the consulting company that Maurice also shown some data for us. We see this deficit on governments. So that means that governments are spending way more than they are collecting. But on the other hand, we don't see citizens more satisfied. So that for us is a problem. The problem can be that it might be that governments could be spending their money on something that is not really the population's necessities. So the problem is that with the communication between citizens and the government. So what we see that there are two locks that block this communication, and they don't allow citizens to talk to governments and governments to properly talk to citizens. So that's where Colab wants to work in this with these blocks. So Colab is a company that is from Brazil. It has 5 years now, and we work with a lot of cities, and that's our main purpose, is to be a key that is going to unlock what's separating citizens from governments. But we don't want to do that just by showing some way that they can talk to each other. We want to make a real transition. And what is this transition? This is a transition from the old public management to a new public management. And how do these models can be different from each other? So in the old public management, we had closeness. So both the government and the population, they were not very open for communication. And now with the new public management, we have openness. We also had polarized sides, both when you see the two sides that are not communicating well, but also if you see how government works. In the old public management, all the problems, they were solved in different secretaries, and this was very shocking. They were not talking to each other. And we believe there are a lot of problems, they need to be solved in an integrated way. So that means that a lot of secretaries and a lot of different groups need to be talking about the same thing to solve this problem. Also, we need to stop being reactive and start being responsive. Sorry, 1 second. I don't know why, but we had technical problems. Yeah, we cannot go back. Let's see. Oh, here. Okay. Sorry. So we need to stop being reactive and start being responsive. And what that means, government cannot be just reacting to the population's complaints and critics, but it has to be responsive. It has to give their answers and also show an open way so they can communicate and not just react when there's a special need. We need to stop being isolated and start working in networks. So that means also about the different secretaries, as I said before, but also different organizations. So government working with governments of different municipalities, of different states, also working with the civil society, working with companies. So everything needs to be working in a network so that we can really solve the problems. Also, we need to stop being in a strict way of public management and start using experimentation. That means the public management cannot wait until they have the answer, until they have everything really well expected so they can act. They can start more experimenting and then changing the way they act according to the results.
Yes. On this last topic, we would really like to invite governments to experiment. So perhaps put something in the street, see if it happens, and then come back to their offices and see what could change, and generate data on that, so that data can direct them on the changes that were shown in the experimentation. So we, from what Luisa said, we consider ourselves a bridge that connects citizens to government, and we do that mainly through technology. So on the citizen side, we have an app, a mobile app, that works a lot like the social networks that we use day by day on our cell phones, especially Instagram and Facebook, but mainly Instagram. And that's why we are, very well known worldwide to be a social network for citizenship. And how does Colab works? So we expect citizens to help their governments to find and prioritize the main problems in the city. And how can the citizens do that? So imagine you are walking down the street and you see a hole, or you're walking down the street and you see a car parked in a prohibited place. Through Colab, the citizen can take a picture, he can select the category, and he can put the specific location of that problem. And that picture will be posted, and then the community can support the post, they can comment the post. And what is most interesting, as you can see on this image here on the middle, is that all the interventions that the municipality does with the citizens are posted as a comment. So when you're going down like a picture or something, you see your municipality talking to you as if it was a friend, So it's very interesting, and it talks to what Luisa said about stop being so strict. And what is very interesting as well is that, as you can see on the picture from the far right, is that people can see when something is solved. So we see lots of thank you notes, we see lots of complaints as well, but it's a way that the municipality can show their work, and the citizens can talk to the municipality in a way that's very, very usual, just like we do day by day with our friends. So here I have a few more pictures. As you can see, all citizens are registered with their own profile and with a picture, and they can, in some cases, they have to put the number of their documents so that we can verify it's a real citizen. And then they also have a notification center, and whenever someone supports their post, they receive that as a notification. So apart from communicating the municipality about our usual problems of the cities, we also have a functionality where citizens can participate on different decisions that public managers need to take every day, such as the participatory budgeting, for example. We'll show you a case on that up ahead. And as you can see here, it's really easy to vote, because you imagine you open your app and then you have a question for you from your municipality that's asking you what would you prioritize to put in an open space that's empty in the city, that's close to you. So you can choose between a school, you can choose between a medical center, you can choose between a park, and with that, we generate data through Colab, and then we help those public managers to make their decisions. So here is an example, like you can have multiple choices, you can justify why you chose that, you can use pictures, and what's interesting is that Luisa here, for example, she works every day helping the municipalities on which questions are better to put in each moment of the consultation process, because there's an engagement challenge there, and we couldn't, for example, have a question that's longer than 5 lines, for example, because then we would probably unengage the citizen on that process. So with that said, we are on the citizen side of technology, transparent, interactive, very friendly, as I told you, and engaging, structured. Why is the word structured here? Because we don't believe we also have to help governments on how to organize all the information that comes from the citizens, or else we would have a great risk on losing all that information. So we really prioritize the structure on how the information from the citizen goes to the government. And that's also important because on the side of the government, we also have a managing platform which is called Colab.re. Colab.re is a platform where the managers can manage, where managers can manage all the posts that come from the citizens. And what's really interesting here is that from this platform, you can forward the post to the responsible entity. So here in Brazil, we see cases where in a municipality, if a citizen goes there, a person writes down what the citizen needs, and then the person takes this paper to the responsible entity. So in that process, you can lose your paper. You don't count on how long they took to solve this problem, and we have very good reception from the public managers, as Luisa will tell a case we have.
Yeah, so just yesterday I was talking to Aracaju, which is a municipality here in Brazil, and they just started using Colab, and she was telling me that it's so interesting that with Colab, they feel that all the public servants, they are more motivated to solve the problems because you see the platform, so it's very visual. So you can see how what the status of every demand, and also you can see how long it took you to complete this demand. So it's like a game. You want to be better, you want to become better. So it's a way to control, and it's a way to engage the public servant.
Exactly. So here you can see we generate lots of data and graphs and everything so that we can engage the public managers on solve the citizens' demands faster and better, you know. So we have more than 100 clients in municipalities around Brazil, and on that process we have learned that our biggest challenge wasn't to just implement the technology in a municipality. We needed a change of mindset, because since it's very transparent and it's very engaging and it's very, you know, it's not strict, it's very fluid the way the government talks to citizens. Most governments were afraid, you know, it's not an easy process to go from the old public management to the new public management. And that's when we realized we had a bigger challenge that would be the change of mindset. So we gathered a team of specialists. This is Colab team. We all stay here in São Paulo, in Brazil. And we started working on workshops and training sessions so that we could gather public managers. And since we are in lots of cities around Brazil, we have to use video conferences a lot, but we necessarily have one person that goes at least once a month to the city so that he can talk to the teams, and so that they can show the data that we have produced on our platform, and so that they can all agree on the metrics, and they can have common objectives toward the citizens. So we also build a governance. So here in the municipality of Maceió, we have all the secretaries here gathered so that they can talk about what are their main goals with Colab. Right, and then as the governance, we put a leader inside. We select a leader inside the municipality, and he is the team leader that will be responsible to monitor the data and how the managers are communicating with their citizens. And also another thing that I would like to point out is that for Colab's success in a municipality, it's really important to have the leaders' commitment in order to the project so that the project can have its better outcomes. So as we said, it's a change of mindset. So we need to have the mayor or the governor or even the president really committed on changing the mindset on the public management. And here, a little more of data intelligence. So here, for example, is an example of all the posts that is distributed in a territory. And I would like to ask you a question. I know you can't answer me right now, but maybe in the Q&A session we could talk about it. But I wonder if you ever thought about what's the relationship between city life and the increase of violence. So we, in our team of specialists and data intelligence, we would like to show you that actually you can cross data, and you will find and you will direct public managers on what actions they need to take in the matters of security, in the matters of education and mobility and city mobility, transportation, and so on.
So that's something important, that the system doesn't work just to gather all the demands that population have on their cities, but also it helps to cross the information to get better information that you wouldn't have before, better data that you wouldn't have before. So you can see that in the same point, the lack of public listening has an impact on the increase of violence. And you see that on the other point, the number of vehicles parked in an unappropriated area during the time of, I don't know, 11 to 6 p.m. is increased. So you can send the guards to this part. You know, you can use this intelligence to maybe make some patterns so you can work and make the public policies to work among with this data.
Yeah, and it's really important to notice that all this data we're talking about is the data that the citizens gave to government. So it's not us that are creating any of this data. It's something that the citizen was walking on the street and then he sent to the government an important data that will turn out to this huge graphs, and that would actually direct the public policy. So here are some of the examples. And here I will show you very quickly on a few cases we have that we already use the platform to help on government decisions. And then up next, Luisa will really deepen on 3 of our cases especially. So here in the municipality of Campinas, it's a really big municipality close to São Paulo, which is the biggest municipality in the country. We have like 11 million people here. Campinas is really close, and there we have a really interesting case that's one of my favorites, because the municipality had a budget separated to do a festival on the city, and instead of deciding which band they would put on to play, they used Colab to ask the population what were their favorite band and what would they like to see. So they listed like 5, 6 possibilities that were inside their budget, and then the population chose. And it was really nice because people were very excited, you know, like they were somehow of contests, like, I can't believe you voted on that artist, I wish you had voted on the other one. So you really engage citizens on a matter that they should be engaged, actually. And on the same city, they had separated 1 million reais and they didn't know, they had a leftover. You know, like we that work in government, we separate the resources in 1 year, and then we necessarily have to use that in the next year. And I don't know how, don't ask me how, there were a leftover of 1 million reais in this year. And then they asked the population, what should we do with this extra 1 million? And here there's an example of, they were all, they are all public policies that involve culture. So here you have a cinema room, here you have a digital fabrication, I guess it's like a Fab Lab or something. So you have a very good example here. And in Santos, which is this very beautiful city, I was born there, they did participatory budgeting, because what happened is that the leaders of the communities were the ones that necessarily voted on the participatory budgeting. So they, even if they asked the population what they would like to prioritize to put the 10 million reais, only like 200 or 250 people would answer. And with Colab, we enlarged that 10 times. So we had more than 3,000 average citizens that weren't necessarily involved in an organization voting where they would like to put the 10 million reais. And what's interesting here is that when you vote and when you register your neighborhood. So we can tell the municipality what's a priority in each of the city's region, you know, so that's a really important thing as well. And then here we'll talk about this case later, which Luisa will tell you. And then here we have lots of data, as I told you. And we won a few prizes this last few years. So we were elected Best Urban App of the World by the New Cities Foundation. We were top 5 World's Best App, Government App by United Nations. We were selected as Startup of Most Global Impact by IDB. And this one is my favorite because we received a letter from the United States Department where we were selected as one of the 16 best companies in the world to address the
Sustainable Development,
the SDGs.
Yeah.
I was going to say that in Portuguese, but the SDGs, most specifically the 16, which promotes peace and justice and the institutions, welfare of the institutions, I guess. And we are always innovating, so we will soon launch a gamification in the platform, because although it's a very engaging platform, citizens are not always using it. So we want to make the citizens to use more and to contribute more with the government. So it will be like a citizenship game, and then whenever you help the municipality, you earn points, and then we will rank the citizens that help most. And our biggest dream is that the citizens that would help most the municipality would have somehow a decrease on tax or something like that. So it's just to illustrate what we think from gamification. And last, just our hub of municipalities, like they are always exchanging experiences and networking. And we also have a hub of public, sorry, I exited. Sorry. We also have a hub of public managers, so we will soon launch as well online classes about collaborative management. And we would like to put together public managers that really want to transition from the old to the new public management. And we have lots of organizations that are partners, such as UN Habitat, and a lot of other organizations here in Brazil. And now I will pass it over to Louise, to the other Louisa, and she will go deepen on our cases. Thank you.
So as we were talking about, we have some participatory processes, and from that we also generate data for the municipalities. The municipalities or other clients that can have a participatory processes through Colab. So I'm going to show you first. This year we went to the 4th International Conference on Democratic Government in the developing world to present the cases of the participatory processes that were used on Colab. So one thing that was special about that is that we just not helped to conduct the process in both municipalities, but also we took some time to analyze the processes based on 2 frameworks. So we use FUND framework that analyzes the link between discussions and public policy, public action or public policy, analyzes who participates and how participants exchange information and make decisions. So to make a reference to what Louisa was saying about the example of the budget, in some cases the participatory processes, they are held only to for some people to participate. And what we do on Colab is that everyone can participate, so it's much more democratic. So here, in FUND's framework, in terms of who participates would be the diffuse public, so the most open option for public process. Also, in terms of authority and power, that means how the public action is going to consider the data. So we have a big commitment to the population when we do a participatory process with municipalities, that we will deliver to the population a resume of all the results. So although this process, they don't have the power to be like real, so what people vote is not actually what's going to happen because it doesn't have this power according to our constitution, but we give the results to the population so they can go to the municipality after and say, hey, we voted this way, why are you acting that way? So it's a way so they can be close and controlling the government. So we give this option for our population. And also in terms of communication and decision mode, so that's something that we learned from the experiences, because when we do a digital process, there's no space for people to talk to each other while they're voting. They can vote on a discussion in another social media, they can discuss somewhere else, but while they're voting, they cannot talk to each other. So we started doing in some municipalities, depending on the type of the process, we also work with the municipality to do face-to-face events so that people can actually talk to each other and after that vote. So it doesn't take out the part of the discussion. It includes the discussion of face-to-face events, and the consultation page is available so they can vote on the internet. So we used Einstein's framework as well, besides the funds, because it has the letter of citizen participation. So it separates what is information from what is consultation and what is citizen control. So for us, it's more on the consultation part because it's what our constitution says about public consultations. And I'm going to show you these cases of the pluriannual plan, which is a long-term plan that municipalities have to do every 4 years to plan the next 4 years. And they decided, Niterói and Teresina decided to use Colab to do that last year. So the strategy was to use the public platform, but considering the need of places for people to discuss, and also the problem of digital exclusion, which still is a problem in Brazil and I believe in many countries in America. We made face-to-face events, and also people on those events, they were with tablets so people could vote and they didn't have to have a smartphone or a computer, so they could participate with this in those events. And here, this photo here is about a van, which was the participatory van in Teresina. And it went to different neighborhoods and with the tablets so people could vote. Besides that, we have another project on participatory process that was not related to any municipality, so it was just Colab asking the questions to the population. We asked them about how well they know the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and we also asked them what they want to prioritize in their cities. So here you see a profile of the participants because, as Lisa said, they have to create their profiles in order to respond. So that means that we can separate the data based on who the people are in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of neighborhood, city, scholar education, how well scholar they are. And here in the screen you see one of these results. So we asked them how well they know the Sustainable Development Goals, and we see that 42% of the population in general say that they don't know, but if you go to some cities, if you go to Porto Alegre, for example, you see that 54% of the population knows what the SDGs are, but only 15% have heard from the SDGs with their municipalities. So 15% of the population have heard the municipality talking about SDGs. The other part of the population didn't hear it. So you can see, if you have this public process for the entire country, you can use the filters and see how different the results are for each area, and you can see which areas need more attention in those cases. I'll just pass this one. And you see that this public consultation we did inspired another contract that we are having now with UN Habitat, so United Nations Habitat. They want to make a public consultation process with Brazil first, and then maybe take it to Peru and Bolivia and to other Latin American countries about the SDG number 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. So UN developed the consultation, the questionnaire, and we helped to analyze how well it would be received by the Brazilian population. We helped to translate, to make the language more suitable for the Brazilian population. And this process will be launched in October. So October, November, and December, Brazil's population can vote and participate to analyze how well their cities are going in the way of achieving the SDG 11. And the motivation for that was that UN wants to create better ways to measure how well the cities are going towards this SDG, and they want to do it with the population. So the population is who's going to give the best ways of measuring. So that's like very interesting, because it shows the power of population and the power of using the population's perceptions in order to evaluate a public policy. Because of course it's important to have a technical evaluation, but the perception of the population is what really matters. So here are some questions that they asked about recycling, about public transportation, about public participation. And after a participant votes, he will get to this screen where he can see his results. These topics here are the topics that gather some aspects of the SDG, and he can compare his perception to his country and to Brazil. So to see if he voted more this way and Brazil is thinking that way, so what does that mean? And it's very interesting that UN is doing that. So to finish, we believe that the future of government is an open government that is integrated, engaged, collaborative, and our purpose is to make better citizens to citizens, with the citizens. Better cities with the citizens, to the citizens. To the citizens. Thank you guys. And we will be very glad to answer questions, and we want to take this knowledge as further as we would like. So if we could send our emails later, we would be more than open to talk to you so that we can explore many more possibilities.
Thank you very much to Luisa. Both Luisas, thank you very much. Thank you very much for presentation. Very practical experience that show us that there are cases that they work and very useful. So very good attributes of participation, engagement, and everything that's contained within open government and open data. So great presentation. Thank you very, very much. Maybe in the Q&A we can talk more about the specifics of the project. I'm sure you have challenges down the road putting all this together. You know, what were those challenges, for example, how you overcome them, you know, what was the evolution of this process, and seeing now all the platforms, tools, apps you started at one point with nothing, and you're this right now. You know, those kind of things that will probably give us good insights for a case of such as Belize that it's starting on this process. But Colab, my congratulations to you, not just for this presentation, but for the actual initiative and case. Is definitely a flagship worldwide, and we're very glad that we can have you here sharing that experience with Belize in this session. Without further ado, I'm going to ask Maurice, and I'm going to also ask Henry Wade in Belize also to turn your cameras on. We're going to move quickly to the Q&A. We have good time for that. Please don't forget to send us your questions through the chat room. I invite Luisa to take a look at the chat as well. Maybe there's some comments along the lines of what participants have said. You can also leave your contact information or links or anything else that you would like to add in the chat for the participants. Again, this session is recorded and the resources will be shared with all participants and will be made public. That includes the chat, the transcript of the chat here in this tool. So thank you very much. It's Maurice. Maurice, if you can just turn your camera on, we're gonna move to the Q&A. I'm gonna also ask Henry at this time to turn your microphone. Mr. Henry Wade in Belize right now will facilitate this session. Please do not leave any questions. This is the time, the right time. We won't have Maurice, Luisa Barbosa, and Wisdom Martin again together anytime soon, at least anytime soon. So this is a good time to ask them those questions. Henry, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Are you guys hearing me clearly over this side?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So a wonderful couple of presentations. Maurice, thank you so much for sharing insights on all the wonderful initiatives that are occurring in Jamaica. I know I've spoken with several of the attendees here in Belize, and we're looking at possible scenarios that can fit the Belizean context. So thank you so much for that. And to our two Louises, thank you, ladies, so much for that enlightening discussion. I see we had a question in the chat from Lee, if there's anyone from the Belize City Council. Unfortunately, not the Belize City Council, Lee, but we do have participants from the Belmopan City Council, the capital of Belize. So that answers that question, and I'm sure we're going to get some questions from their end as well. So just wanted to thank you all for your presentations. And moving into the first question, I see we had a question from Mr. Smith, who was asking about the 3 pillars, but Melanie from Red International had addressed those. Mr. Smith was asking of the 3 pillars that Maurice had spoken about. Mr. McNaughton, would you want to again go over those 3 pillars for us briefly?
Sure. So I see Melanie's response, and yeah, transparency, participation, and collaboration are generally 3 of the important pillars within the open data landscape. But the 3 that I mentioned are the 3 that we emphasize for the work of the Caribbean Open Institute. It was advocacy in terms of our engagement with public sector, evidence. So because of our university sort of origins, we do a lot of research to understand the opportunities for open data and the impact potential. And then the third was capacity, so that we believe capacity building is a key part of our mission. So those are the 3 pillars for the Caribbean Open Institute and the way we have sort of prioritized our activities.
Excellent, thank you. I see Mr. Smith agreeing and taking notes. So thank you for that. Following Mr. Smith's question, we had Marvin from the Yakshe Conservation Trust asked a question that's more localized. He was pointing out that at this point we have a sense of how collaborative this effort is, but how open will the government of Belize be to this effort? The project is still in its infancy, Marvin, but I wanted to change the question a bit and direct it to Maurice again in terms of when Jamaica and by way of UWI started to take on open government and open data. How receptive was the government? Was there an initial partnership? What was the process or steps taken at that inception? If you could share some insight with us.
Yeah, so I will confess that a large part of the barriers that we've had over the years has been a certain amount of apathy on the part of the government at the level of policy frameworks. But where we actually had the most traction and the most engagement is at specific agency levels. So, for instance, we engage directly with the agency in the Ministry of Agriculture that deals with extension services, and they have been one of our strongest partners and allies in the work that we've done with agriculture. So again, it goes back to the point that I made that we haven't just approached this as a blanket, well, government, can you just open data? But we're focused on specific sectors and specific problems. And in fact, the data that has been released, we started with a problem and now worked our way back to identifying the data that can help to solve that problem. So we have found that very problem-centered, specific approach to work very well at an agency level. The bigger challenge has been at the larger macro level and at the policy framework. That has moved a lot slower than we would have liked.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. And in speaking to the project and where we are, and to address Marvin's question, we're seeing that because of the new concept of open government and open data here in Belize, it's taking a while for traction to really take root. Not surprising, but we're making all efforts and strides to engage with government partners as well as civil society organizations and entities. So I hope that answers Marvin's question and shares a little bit of context in terms of what Jamaica went through in its inception. Following up on that question, this one is also directed at Maurice again from Mr. Smith. Are there any existing linkages between the UWI-based initiative and the Open Campus, for example, here in Belize? If not, is there potential for some sort of linkage to occur? That's a very good question. And I know that Mike has maybe provided some comment on that.
Right. So there are not any current linkages with Belize, but as you know, UA is a regional institution, and it's one of the strengths of the Caribbean Open Institute. So, for instance, our colleagues in Trinidad are also founding members of the Caribbean Open Institute, and we work quite closely with them. I actually happen to know the principal of UA Open Campus, Luz Longworth, who is Belizean, very well. And quite recently, when I made a visit there, we had some initial discussions. So I'm very optimistic that we will in fact be able to mobilize engagements and collaboration through the UA Open Campus in Belize. So that's something that we're happy to pursue as the Belize project evolves.
Wonderful, thank you. This question comes from Lee, and I want to direct it to our two Louises in Brazil. So Lee says, my sense is that the public have become so used to being excluded from decision making and from access to data, and the government has really made accessible. It is almost taken for granted that the information is kept off limits. How do we challenge this paradigm? How do we change that mindset? And furthermore, how do we define what data cannot be made public and what can? So I want to throw that to you guys, and then also ask if Maurice could chime in as well. I think your microphone is mute.
Sorry. I believe that this comment was actually made before our presentations. We read it just before starting, but it connects to what we talked. So I can answer from our side, and then Maurice can answer from his side. I think it's the point of connection between both presentations. On our side, the data that we don't make public is the name of the public servant that actually worked on your demand. So when you make when you're a population and you make a demand on the app, you can see that the municipality is talking to you, but you don't know exactly who from the municipality is talking to you if you're a citizen. But if you work to the municipality and you have the user on the Colab.re platform, then you can see who's actually responding to which demand and who's responsible for which demand. So that's the difference. And also, you can see the time. It's public, so it's public what the municipality is answering you, and the time it took for them to finish your demand, to solve your problem. Also, you can see. Let me think. What else is not public?
I think that there's a comment I would like to make here, that instead of we have stuff that it's not public, but we prioritized, I mean, not us, because we were not on the founding moment of Colab, but our founders, they have prioritized what can be public. So, for example, when there's a health issue regarding a medical center, a public medical center, for example, that shall not be, there's not a category in the Colab app that regards those matters. You know, like we know what Colab is for, and there's another way that's just for government, that we have our platform can be linked to Facebook. So that's the kind of demand that a citizen usually Facebooks the municipality, and then they do just the management, but that is not open so that anyone can see. So just to to resume what I just said, we usually have those questions for government, and what we usually answer is that we only have categories on the Colab app that can be shown. And still, on different parts of the country, we have a very specific geographical condition. Here in Brazil, we are a very extensive country, and we have very small countries inside the same country. And we see that in different regions, governments are more or less open to the way Colab works. So if we go more to the insides of the country, we have more challenges on convincing on transparency, instead of, like capitals, how do you say capitals?
The city capital.
The city capital, the state capital, you have more openness from the public managers. I hope we have answered your question.
You also mentioned the difference of the paradigms, and I believe that's very similar to the old public management and the new public management. So I hope that answered as well.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies. Maurice, is there anything to add on that? How do we change that paradigm from your perspective? I think your mic is muted, Maurice.
Okay, there I was talking happily to myself. Yeah, I mean, the idea generally with open data is that you don't publish anything that is personal data or has any security implications, and that's a very sort of broad principle. More specifically for us, we have found that it is generally easier to tackle the paradigm of the traditional paradigm or culture, if you will, of not sharing data in the public sector. We've found it useful to start from a problem, a very well-defined problem, and work our way back, working with the government agencies to identify what data do we need to address that problem. And that has been a more comfortable conversation than just starting with, well, let's open data up. Of course, when countries get to a stage where they have an open data policy and an open data portal, that issue of the supply side releasing data becomes easier. But at the stage where a lot of our countries are, I know Belize perhaps is there. Jamaica just published an open data portal a couple of years ago, but we still don't have an overarching policy. In that kind of context, we find the conversation around releasing data easier if you start with a problem. So in agriculture, we start with a problem of predial larceny, and we work with the government agencies to say, what data can you provide to help us to tackle this problem? So it's more of a co-creation kind of problem-solving approach. And generally, when we've done that, we found good receptiveness to making data available to address these issues. So that has been sort of very sector-specific approaches. And again, what Louisa said is that in the context of the application, there's some data that would be made available because it helps the application to work more effectively. Let me just give you one very quick example. Working in agriculture, the agency has a lot of data on farmers, and they're reluctant to publish information about the farmer's name and their address and contact information. But if you're building an application to facilitate market access, where persons want to get access to those farmers who might say, well, I have tomatoes or bananas or some other produce that is becoming available in the market, then the farmer does want to be contacted. So the issue becomes one of, well, will they consent to make their personal data available in the publishing of this information so that they can be contacted by prospective buyers? So it's very much an issue of how does the information that is released help to solve a specific problem within a particular context.
Excellent, thank you. I see we have a question from Susan. Where is this Caribbean School of Data? I think this is directed to Maurice.
Yes, so the Caribbean School of Data is a virtual concept. It's an idea that we've developed, and we're actually testing the model of capacity building in a project that we have in Haiti at the moment. So, it's an approach to data literacy and capacity building that tries to address some of the scale challenges of having to have everybody in a classroom to train them. So we're doing things like using e-learning, mobile-enabled applications, and centralized data collection to adopt a blended approach to training. It's a concept, as I said, that we're currently testing in a project in Haiti that's actually going quite well, and it's something that we hope to be able to scale up on a regional basis. But I can certainly share some more information about the approaches we're using through Mike after this call. But it's something that we see as very critical. We have to increase the level of data literacy across the Caribbean, and this is across the board. So we have to think of data literacy in the same way that we used to think of numeracy and the ability to read. Having citizens nowadays who are very comfortable with data and working with data is fundamental to our future as a region. So we think data literacy and capacity building around that is a very important topic that has to be a part of every conversation in the open data ecosystem.
Thank you, Maurice. Susan then goes on to ask, and I believe this is for two Louises, is the Colab platform developed and held as a private entity?
Oh, no, now we're fine. Thank you. You can hear us, right? Yes, not muted, sorry. So hi, Susan. Thanks for your question. Yes, Colab is a private entity. We have been founded 5 years ago, and we had our first round of investments, and our business model works on for the citizens. It's a free platform, although all these workshops and the use of Colab.re, we have an annual fee for the municipality, and we consider ourselves the software as a service. And that's, I mean, Mike, you asked us to talk a little about our challenges. The selling to government is a very big challenge here in Brazil. We are still not able to bring innovation as in the buying regime of the government. So this is an everyday challenge we face, and we have been working so that the innovation don't stay just on the private sector, but it also goes to the way that the law is enforced on the openness of government acquiring innovation. And what is interesting is that when we have more flexible rules on buying innovation from the government, you also influence on the development of the private sector that works on that matter. So it's really a two-way benefit. Both ways, both sides are. I lost the word. I'm sorry. It's good for both sides, you know. So that's one of our challenges here. But we are one of the only companies, I would guess, that survive by selling to governments. And one last thing I'd like to notice is that we have, although we are a private company, we work 100% on the social purpose. So our platform and our mission, our values are 100% towards the development of the public management here in Brazil.
Thank you. We have a couple questions in our audience here. So I'll ask our first participant if she can identify herself and ask a question. Can you hear her clearly, guys? Okay. Maybe, yeah. Yes. A little bit closer. Thank you.
I'm Irene Bulwer. I'm trying to ascertain if there are any experiences where data have been utilized to improve citizen security. I'm thinking in the context of crime, drug use, drug dealers.
Is that directed to? I know.
Just like my
general.
It's just a general question.
So perhaps you could have Maurice attempt that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Generally speaking, there's not been a lot of enthusiasm about releasing data in relation to crime and crime incidents, except at a very aggregate statistical level. But the only example I know of is actually an application that was created by some entrepreneurs here called CrimeBot, which is a kind of citizen reporting application. So you download the app and you can report an incident of crime that may be happening or a situation that may be developing, and all of that gets crowdsourced into a kind of dashboard, which in fact the security forces plug into as well. But that is very much a crowdsourced type of application and relies on citizens actually reporting instances of crime. But it was quite popular a year ago. I haven't seen much word of it recently. But that kind of model then depends on crowdsourcing citizens reporting crimes and having some kind of back-end dashboard that can allow, for instance, the security forces to respond to that, or to have logic which says, well, if there are 10 reports of an incident in a particular situation, that logic might suggest that this is not a nuisance report, but it could be a real incident. So I am aware of that application. I can share additional information on that if it's of interest.
Maurice, we have one question from our representative from the Belapan City Council, and one more from Mr. Smith, and then I think we're going to be closing for today. So, go ahead.
Hello, morning. My name is Kayla Magana, and I work at the Belapan City Council. We're very interested in having this type of participatory approach. We do not have it to the level that you guys have it when it comes to an application, a mobile application, but we do have certain, a lot of interactions with face-to-face, urban planning charades, and open consultations for various types of activities that we're having. So this is, Colab is very interesting to me. So I would want to know what are some of the requisites that the municipality would need to have, like management information systems, software. What are some of those requisites that the municipality would need for Colab to work?
So I will start, and then Luisa will complement me. So just to verify, your question was what are the resources needed so that Colab can be implemented in the municipality? Is that it? Okay, perfect. Yeah, that is a really, really important question. But actually, it's very simple. I will divide my answer into blocks. The first is the technology resources, and the second is the human resources. So in the matters of technology resources, our system works in the cloud. So as I said, we are a software as a service. So you log into Colab, you have a link where you log in, and then you have your email as a login and a password. And what's interesting on that is that all the public managers are registered on the platform, and we can vary the role that the manager has on the platform. So for example, if you're a manager that looks at the entire entity, you will have this access. But if you're the technician that goes up to the hole and fix the hole, you could only be able to see what are the demands that is in your responsibility. And then we register, especially Lou does that job every day, because we draw the governance, and then we register the servers on platform, and then the servers can either access through a computer on the link, or that they can also use their mobiles to access the platform. So it's in the cloud. All the information stays in the cloud. And then that's non-technology matters, so it's interesting to have a good computer, a good internet service, a cell phone, and all those basic stuff, but there's no need to huge things. And Luisa will talk a little bit about the human resources and what are the characteristics that we need.
Yeah, just to complement with that, like that these are the basic stuff, but in Brazilian reality, that still is a problem. So we are trying to, that's something when a municipality wants to hire Colab service, we need to talk to them and verify how the internet service is on the municipality, because they do have this problem. But usually what we see is that they can, Colab sometimes help to show how important it is for the municipality to have internet and to have access to internet. So what we saw in a small municipality we were working with, is that during the time Colab.re was there, they hired a new system of internet. They could buy new computers and they could improve their digital capacity. Yeah, their digital capacity. And in terms of human resources, what we need to start the program is that we need to identify who are the key people in the municipality that will have to engage the public servants. So with the platform, we engage them by sending notifications and showing how well they're doing, or if they need to pay attention to some aspects or another aspect. But we need people in the municipality that are engaged with the program, so they can be engaging one another to work well, to give better answers to the citizens, to ask more the citizens, do more participatory process, and goes on. And one thing that we found out with the experience of different municipalities is that once the major supports Colab.re, so if the major is someone who talks a lot about Colab.re and thinks Colab.re is a really good service, then the entire municipality starts to work better on Colab.re, to use better the platform. So what we identified is that we need to start by the major, by convincing the major. Like we have both processes. We usually start by the base, by the public servants, but now we found out that the public servants, they are really motivated by the major. So we need to start with the major and work convincing both parts, so we have to convince everyone in order to make a good process.
Yeah. And just one last thing, sorry. Just like as basic characteristics, it's really nice to have public servants that like to use technology, that are interested on innovation, and that they're very communicative, that like to talk to citizens, that like to talk to other public managers. So when we enter in the city, we have a list of characteristics that we would like to Colab team in.
Okay, thank you so much. I know there's a lot more questions that's lingering out there, so we invite all the participants, if there's any questions that you'd like to share with our experts, please feel free to email us, and then we can forward those for answering and sharing with you guys. So with that said, I know we're at the 12 o'clock mark here in Belize, 2 p.m. in DC. So I want to now hand it over to Mike. Again, both Louises, thank you ladies so much. Maurice, thank you for another wonderful presentation. Guys, if it's okay, can we give our presenters a round of applause? Thank you. So with that said,
thank you very much, Henry. Mike to Mike, I appreciate that. Thank you definitely to the presenters, to Luisa Barbosa, to Lisa Jardim, to Maurice, of course, to all participants on site. We can see you there. You're very lucky, different from us here on the screen, and most likely to the online participants, you have refreshments given. That's wonderful. We were not that lucky. And of course, to the online participants as well, thank you for the engagement. I want to wrap up, trying to give a picture with some of the responses, questions and responses that were given there, and then complement, and again, invite you to stay connected to the project and to share the information that you acquire and revisit previous sessions. The first thing I want to say, answering a comment by Andrew Castillo there, is that these open government, open data initiatives require the participation of everybody. Everybody needs to be engaged. Government, civil society, private sector, academia, any non-state government actor, they all need to be engaged. For the benefit of the doubt, we had implemented sessions for government officials already. This is specifically for civil society, but we had already trained a group of public officers on open government and open data. It was actually more focus on open data than open government to make it more practical. So there is already ground there and a group of people working as agents for change for this. We implemented this one for civil society in a separate way, in a separate fashion as well, with the idea of bringing you together with government once you had already been exposed to this knowledge and that we call the Belize Open Week. So we had set it up that way to make sure that we all come together already knowing what this is and what could work. And yes, we have to make sure that we engage as many possible actors in this process. Government, yes, important. We need the political buy-in, and that's something very important, but we also, and not just of the upper executives of the government, but also at the local level. In Luisa was mentioned to it in terms of what is needed at the municipal level. The political will, the buy-in, it's needed. And so even if it's a mayor, if it's a prime minister, if it's a minister, if it's the CEO of an institution, a public institution, or if it's the director of an institution, they need to be embracing this. Hopefully, this project will help in doing so. So yeah, we need to strengthen the entire open government ecosystem, and that's what this project is doing there. Now, we not only need to embrace them, equip them with those capacities that Maurice was talking about, but we also need to make sure that we have the same understanding under the same roof. And that's important because it's not an easy process of dialogue, of choosing how to budget for certain things. And so we need to make sure that dialogue is well exercised. That is very important. And that has also a lot to do with what's needed at the municipal level or at the national level beyond the resources and the human resources, the financial resources and the human resources, which is a framework. And I understand the response from Luisa because they already have a framework to use where they can easily say we need this. But in some countries such as Belize, you need open government infrastructure, that framework that actually allows you to implement this. And so then you can allocate resources and financial resources and human resources. And so you need to establish that framework. That's something that this project is intended to support as well, to make sure that the ecosystem is established, is strengthened, but then policies need to be taken into consideration as well. If you don't have policies in place, it will be much harder also to start working on this. So you need definitely a broad overall framework at the local level and the national level. And then just to close these final remarks, this wrap up has to do, and I want to bring it to a very practical thing that is related to the question about data on drug trafficking, crime, and so on. And here the thing is, it's not to open data or to look at opening data for the sake of having open data. That is important. As Maurice pointed out, there's data use on that, there's more statistical data on that. And you can see New York City has an open data portal on drug crime. And there are different catalogs that have that, and United Nations have the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime have a lot of statistics on that. The OAS also has a lot of statistics on that, but it's more of a statistical perspective. And then the question is, what do we need that data for? What do we need the open data on this for exactly? What's that we're trying to look at? Let's don't request to open data, specific open data without knowing exactly what's the purpose of it. So that requires a dialogue. Now, there is institutions that deal with that at the national level. There is civil society who's concerned or got a specific concern about it. how we can talk and try to identify what's the data that's needed for a specific solution or to deal or to address a specific thing. So, and I'm just saying that because, again, you need a framework, you need financial resources, you need technical resources, but you also need a lot of understanding about what to open data for. And I think that's the question about it is a very good question. And that's probably precisely why there is not so much engagement with open data or data sets on drug and crime. Because for a citizen to work with that, or for a third party to take that data and make it a service to fight narco traffic, for example, I mean, we have to be, there's probably, ways how, but the citizens engaging on that, maybe they're not there yet. They're more concerned about addressed needs on the city that are not necessarily the crime that they mentioned, but on the streets, on the lights, on many other things that are more day to day. But yes, there is important. That to say that, of course, it's not that data is not important. I think it's important, it's critical, and it's also critical to collect it as well. And so it's a good example just to show that it is very important to think about answering questions about what we want with that data. Okay, that was a huge wrap up. I tried to touch on many things, but the bottom line of this is we will continue with this project, and I will encourage you to do outside of this project to embrace this at the government level, at the civil society level, academia, private sector. I'm glad to see that we have a case here that is private, that is a private sector case, which is Colab. It's not only foundations, it's not only NGOs. It was addressed also by Maurice. And I think this is where it's important. And it's important also to make them sustainable. I leave it there. Want to thank again all of you for your participation. We have extended this 30 minutes. Yes, we delayed the starting point, but we don't want to hold you here. I appreciate the support of Colab. Thank you to the Luisas. Thank you to Maurice again, University of the West Indies, and to the Caribbean Open Institute. Thank you to Henry. Thank you to all participants this time. Do stay connected. The next session is the last session. It's in data journalism. So invite everybody who in Belize who is interested in that, and you participate also. And we'll see you here at the very same time Wednesday at 10 a.m. Belize time for that very last session. And after that, stay tuned again for the DEFCA in Belize Open Week, which is going to happen in October. I said it right? Yeah, October. We got more details coming up. Maurice will be with us in Belize. That's a good thing happening together with other experts that we're putting together for this event. So thank you very much. Henry, I'll let you close, and bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you all. Look forward to visiting Belize again. See you then. Bye.